He's not a fourth liner, not in our books. He's not a depth guy. He's frontline center. He's our Corey Perry. He's our Zach Hyman. Oh, wait. Scratch that. Maybe the Perry, but not the Hyman. Eric Francis joining us. Eric, last night, the Dallas Stars, to me, I think, outside of the game they won, played the best game of the series. There was pushback. There was everything. But once again, they just cannot beat the Edmonton Oilers and that deadly power play. You were at the game. What did it feel like watching it as far as the Stars just seemed to, no matter what they did, the Oilers had an answer?
Yeah, I think the word futile comes to mind. It just seems so futile. That first period, Dallas had 39 shot attempts on net. That's the most in the NHL this season. In the postseason in terms of attempts. But 17 of them missed the net. Like, I really feel like Stuart Skinner is in their head. Stuart, they got 16 shots on goal. That's good pressure. We all watched it. They dominated the period. Yet they leave the period down 1-0 because of a power play goal. And it just seems, like I say, so futile for them to just keep pressing, continually be rejected by Stuart Skinner, who knew that was a thing. And then when they did get great chances, it's like Skinner's so in their head that they're rushing shots and missing the net, and they hit the post on an empty netter, and you would expect it from a team other than Dallas. Dallas finished third in goal scoring this year. They've got depth coming out of the yin-yang, and yet right now nobody is able to solve Stuart Skinner. So, I'm sure like a lot of people watched that game last night, it certainly feels like that series is over. It felt like that after Game 3. But I guess you got to give the credit to the Stars for pushing as hard as they can. But at the end of the day, they're completely outclassed by the Oilers in this series.
The big story coming out of the game, not only did the Oilers win and have a chance with another win to move on to another Stanley Cup final, but what looked to be kind of just an innocent hit along the blue line, Mason Marchment, Zach Hyman. Immediately, Hyman, right arm drops straight to the bench, down the tunnel, and we find out today, shoulder surgery. He's done. Did you see the play? And if you did you know immediately that it wasn't good for Hyman?
Yes, and yes. I mean, I thought it was his shoulder, the way he just kind of slumped down.
Yep.
I think most people thought it was his shoulder, but there wasn't a person who left the rink last night who wasn't worried, thinking this is probably it for Zach Hyman. Like, I know when you get the definitive news today, and he actually has the surgery today on his wrist, there's a finality to it. But last night, it didn't feel right. And when he didn't come back in the game later, you were pretty worried and thinking this is going to be bad. And then now you hear the news. So it's really, like, my heart aches for him because he transformed himself from a 54-goal scorer last year into the biggest hitter of the playoffs this year. He was about to shatter the NHL record for hits in a postseason. And I just give him so much credit. I love any player who's versatile enough to play a physical game as well as a high-skill game. Those guys don't grow on trees. I think the world of him, and he really understood that if I hit everything that moves while playing on a line with Connor McDavid, it's going to soften teams up and matchups up for McDavid to continue to be the best player in the world. So that is a huge, huge loss for that team. I'm not worried about it, how it's going to affect them playing against Dallas, because like I said, I think that series is pretty much over, even if it does come back to Alberta for a 6th game. But I worry in a matchup that I think is going to be so tight against a physical team like Florida, that's an injury that's really, really going to hurt your team.
I'd mentioned earlier in the show, no disrespect to McDavid and Draisaitl. They're as consistent as they can be. But the two best Oilers have been Hyman and 40-year-old Corey Perry. Eric, what is this guy not doing? Like, he's everywhere that they need him to be and at the right time.
Man, the stats were coming out last night. He's played more playoff games than something like, I don't know how many franchises, but most
know.
franchises over the last 20 years. And again, like Hyman, he's found a way to be like prominent, even though who would have thought when they picked him up mid-season? Like when they picked him up last year, I just didn't see this coming. I didn't understand the fit, and I was so wrong on this one, and shame on me, because the guy is a unicorn. He can fit into any. He's like a chameleon, is a better word. I think you're missing a name there. I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is a guy. I think he's been the best Oiler in the series, and 9 points in 4 games. Every game he's had at least 2 points. I think this is a guy we forget about, and nobody kind of considers him like a first overall bust, but you kind of don't ever think about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. He's probably about the 6th guy you think of when you think of the Oilers, and yet every power play, every penalty kill, he's the first man over the boards in all these situations. He's that important to this team, so I'm kind of happy for him. I'm not going to call it a coming out party because he's so deep into his career, but I really think it's amazing how he's been able to be so prominent, so such a definitive star in this series at a time when I'm not sure anyone was thinking that.
For the most part, last night again, and you'd mentioned Stuart Skinner maybe is in their head. There wasn't a lot of action in front of Stu. He was able to see everything. The one thing that I thought is when Jason Robertson scored that goal on the power play, there was traffic in front, and Robertson was able to come through, and I was like, well, maybe that's what's going to spark Dallas. And Robinson, they did play good in spurts, but Eric, you just knew when Jamie Benn took that first penalty.
Yeah.
The Oiler power play is so good. It's almost like you should probably start live betting that they're not going to score, because assume that they are, and if they don't, that's the anomaly in all of this, because they're just too good.
Yeah, and it's their power play that really is what allowed them to survive against the LA Kings when they were down 2-0, and there was that horrific, call by the coach to challenge one of the plays. The Oilers' power play goes on the ice, and 8 seconds later, they're back in the series. What's really fascinating to me about the Oilers is everyone knows that, they've had the record for the best power play in NHL history, the highest proficiency in past years. We know that it's all the same personnel, and they're really deadly. But throughout these playoffs, they haven't leaned on it as their one big tool in their arsenal. They've used it at times to beat you, but most of the time in this series anyway, it's the 5-on-5 play that has been the difference for the Oilers. Like, I was citing a stat yesterday, and it's not just about the Oilers, but it's about all the playoffs. Wyatt Johnston went into last night's game -17. I've wondered, usually the longer you go into a playoff, the better chance you don't have a big minus. That is the NHL record right now, and I bet you, I didn't look after last night's game, but I guarantee he was 2 or 3 minus again last night. He's going to shatter the NHL record for plus-minus in a playoff season. The Dallas Stars cannot score 5-on-5 against the Oilers, and that is the big story, actually, in the series, even though last night the 2 power play goals.
You're covering the series for Sportsnet, and you had a chance to chat with Stars GM Jim Nill the other day. What was your conversation about? Is Jim as frustrated as a lot of Stars fans are that no matter what they're trying, they're just running up against a brick wall?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess the one thing I would take away from that was Jim's like, hey, Jim's been around for so many years, won 4 Stanley Cups with Detroit as a management type.
Yeah,
and
man.
I think he's just like, hey, that's the ebbs and flows of the playoffs. There's going to be days where we're frustrated. There's going to be days when they shut us down. There's going to be days when we shoot ourselves in the foot. He kind of shrugs it off. He doesn't love it. And then I saw him again after the game last night, and he really didn't seem to be very happy. Because it has to be frustrating when goal scoring has not been an issue for your franchise for many years. And suddenly in a 3-game spurt, you completely run dry and your season's over. That's got to be tough. But, again, he's seen it all. I didn't sense frustration at all with him. I sense just a guy who understands that even though you can look like you're down and out and it looks like you're out of a series can flip on a dime. So I think he was kind of clinging to that hope, definitely, when I talked to him.
Tonight, Florida goes into Carolina. It's Game 5. Canes won the other night. They actually looked pretty good. You know what? Panthers played well. Panthers did what they do, but they were missing most of their fourth line. AJ Greer wasn't playing. Sam Reinhart wasn't playing. Mikko Mikkola wasn't playing, but they're all going to be back tonight for Game 5. Sooner or later, you knew that they were going to get one. They're 1-15 now in Eastern Conference Finals. Is tonight when Rod the Bod and the Hurricanes go 1-16 and Florida finishes this off and moves on to the Cup final again?
Yeah, you'd think so. You'd certainly think so, but it made me think about last year. You remember Florida went 3-0 up on the Oilers in the final, and you just thought, okay, it's just a matter of time. They're clearly going to finish them off soon. Oh, well, they lost one. Oh, well, they lost two. Oh, well, they lost three. And then we had a Game 7. But and I'm not suggesting that's going to happen here, but the Panthers are going to want to exhibit that killer instinct and get this thing over in 5 while they're at home. So there is no lingering doubt. They want to get healthy. Look, both the Oilers and Florida look like they're on the verge of ending their series quite early, much earlier than I think a lot of people anticipated. And even though I'm led to believe there's going to be quite a break before the NHL can start, there's actually talk. I was talking to some people with the in and around the league yesterday, and it looks like the final would start on the 7th. And I'm like, you telling me they're not going to bump that up? But there's building issues and such, and I'm not sure if they can bump it up. They're going to bump it up any more than to even to the 5th. So we're going to have a significant break, especially if both these teams finish their opponents off early, which, people say is a good thing because guys can get healed. But I also know that every NHL player is a creature of habit. They don't like going 5, 6, 7 days in a row without any action and having to crank it up to 11 right after that. So but it'll be the same for both teams. So, yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying, I would expect Carolina's out tonight.
It's funny, on social media over the past couple of days, the Spit and Chicklets guys, Biz was talking about the fact that someone's going to be crazy enough to give Mitch Marner $13 million a season, and he's won nothing, and he disappears in the playoffs, but yet Sam Bennett's only going to get 10. Not that 10 is anything that, and all Sam Bennett does is perform in the playoffs, and he's got a cup. And it's that crazy scale of, that doesn't make any sense in the world. But Eric, that could play out that way.
I have said that with Barney. I thought I'd said it with you. That's been my hot take for the last week and a half. Someone's going to pay $3 or $4 million more a year for Marner, and not only is Bennett the player who shows up. Actually, I'd almost argue, over the last 5 or 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years, name me a guy who stepped forward and been a bigger playoff performer than Sam Bennett. Even when he was in Calgary, and they didn't make the playoffs that much, but he was always known as playoff Sam Bennett. And, it is amazing to me because Biz must have stolen my take. He often listens to this.
No, he does.
Yeah, that's okay. I love Biz, so that's okay. But, Bennett plays a more important position up the middle at center. It's harder to find guys up the middle at center. It's hard to find guys who have had success in the playoffs and, have a direct correlation between stepping up their game and when the games mean the most. And Mitch Marner is known around the league as one of the biggest no-shows in the last 10, 12 years in the National Hockey League in the playoffs. So, yeah, I'm 100% with you. The only thing is, obviously, we know, Bennett's limit during the season is probably 50, 55 points. Mitch Marner had 100-plus this year. Mitch Marner sells jerseys. Mitch Marner, you can put posters of all over your city. And he's a guy, he's that shiny object that someone's going to vastly overpay for. But I'm 100% in agreement, man. Sam Bennett, for a GM is trying to win a cup, Sam Bennett's the guy. If I'm the Leafs, I obviously they're walking away from Marner. I walk away from Tavares too if I can get Bennett. If I can't get Bennett, then I'm getting Tavares back. But I want Bennett more than Tavares for sure. That's my take. Problem is, in Toronto, they can't really squeeze him into their salary cap, and you're going to have to pay him for 7 years. So I'm not sure that fits for the Leafs. But Treliving wants that franchise, and so many others need a heart transplant, and Sam Bennett's the guy who can give it to them.
Remember, Eric, when the Jonathan Huberdeau trade went down and the Matthew Tkachuk and all that, and everybody was flaming Bill Zito. This guy is an idiot. He's the dumbest guy in hockey. He's the worst GM in the league. What is this guy doing? He got fleeced, all of that. And Bill Zito just sitting there doing, not that he cared what we thought, cool as a cucumber, making these additions when they need them. They got their cup. They've got all of that. I'm intrigued in the offseason because I don't necessarily know that Bill Zito is just going to let Sam Bennett go without saying, hey, hold on a sec. We got a plan here too. And how they can make all of that fit. Because if they can keep the band together, because what do they have, Bobrovsky for one more year before he becomes a free agent? So if they can keep the band together and keep this thing going, look how hard, Eric, it's hard to have a dynasty in pro sports these days. And I think the Panthers, if they go to their third straight Stanley Cup final, that's as kind of close as you're going to get. So run it back as much as you can. Oh,
my God, yeah. And I don't think it's, for lack of effort. I'm sure Zito and Bennett's camp have been talking all year about the possibility. But given how much his hands are tied by his current cap situation, yeah, it's impossible for Zito to put a plan on or put a number on the table that makes Bennett want to give up a little money to stay in Florida. Look, I still am at the point where I'd be quite surprised if Bennett is not a Florida Panther next year. First of all, he's got to love the lifestyle, the fit. No state tax. There are a million reasons why I still think he's going to stay in Florida, but there may be many more millions of reasons why he may just have to go somewhere else. But I'd be willing to bet you that if it's not Florida and Zito just can't clear the deck to keep him, I'd be willing to bet you it's a market like Dallas. I'm not saying it's Dallas, but a warm weather city. Bennett spent many winters in Calgary, and then he spent several winters in Florida. And I think once you experience a winter in Florida, I have a real hard time believing that all things being equal, you're not going to choose the warm weather city over a cold weather one.
Because you've been down there, correct? You've seen their setup, where they drive their golf carts from their houses to the practice rink and all of that. You've experienced that, have you not?
Dude, every time I see Matthew Tkachuk, he reminds me that he still has not worn shoes to practice since he became a Florida Panther. I've seen Matthew's golf cart. I see how those guys live their life, and I think it's got to be something every NHLer dreams of. There's a reason why the Florida teams are juggernauts of late, and I think will continue to be a juggernaut for a long time. Great management, but also no state tax and a lifestyle that's unmatched around the league, really.
Kind of some other news that just gets dwarfed by everything that's going on in the conference finals. Marco Sturm has been named the new head coach of the Boston Bruins. And I thought I lost track. I thought they already had named a coach, but if not, is he a placeholder for a couple of years? Is this a long-term solution? Because I don't necessarily know that Boston has the roster, although they do have some draft capital coming up. Are they a contender in the next few years?
No, they're not a contender for the next few years. I'm puzzled by that hiring, but I don't know a whole lot about Marco Sturm and what he's been doing. I shouldn't really comment because I don't know much. It just surprised me. I hadn't heard his name up until a couple days ago as a candidate. And obviously what's happening in Boston this year, the trade of Brad Marchand said everything about where they're going to start heading now for the next little while. And they're probably long overdue for, a makeover, and now they're going to get it. So Sturm will be that guy, and you're probably right. He'll probably get to stick around for a year or two, maybe three if he's lucky. And if there's significant growth, he might hang on. But if there's any sort of step backwards, then You know, I often think, though, that all that being said, I often think that guys who take those jobs, you know, you've got a long runway for the, you know, large part, because no one's expecting much from your roster anytime soon. And so as long as they can continue to develop young stars, even if it's one or two every year, I think that coach is safe for a while.
Real quick, you were in Edmonton covering the games up there. Are you going to Dallas? Are you going to be there tomorrow night for game... God, I'm so confused. Is that going to be game 5, game 6, game 5?
Game 5, I will not be going to Dallas. I just pulled into Calgary, and I'll be watching game 5 from the comfort of my home, very, very happily. And then as, like, you know, so many of my colleagues, you know, we all spent 4 days together in Edmonton. Everybody's having a good time, you know, meeting up with old friends, and then everyone says, okay, well, I guess I'll see you back in Edmonton or not. So you could probably guess how a lot of people feel about Edmonton about Dallas stretching this into 6 games. Most guys are not really cheering for it.
Hey, don't let Tourism Edmonton hear this part of the show. They're not going to be impressed. They'll cancel their advertising buy. Calling sales managers they want.
I've always been a hell of a spokesman for Edmonton Tourism. There's no question about it. I'm a big fan.
All right, it's Eric Francis, Inside the NHL, brought to you by Saudi Mainline Chrysler, where employee pricing is back, and this month, you pay what the employees pay.